loading the kiln, I'm using the right height shelf supports for the correct height of the clay objects. And I'm going to lay them in the exact spot where the shelf support is underneath also. Because you want all the weight in the right spot, in the same spot. Okay? Here. I'll load the kiln evenly, giving some airspace around each one. These have dried for 7 to 10 days. These objects are bone dry. Otherwise, they would not go in. Time for another shelf. The next shelf is stacked directly on top of the other one. And so that it's not touching the thermocouples. Okay. This will be the top shelf, but you continue to stack them up as much as you want. This is a small load. It's just a small test load. This is all that will be in this small test load, just 2 shelves. So I spread them out with lots of airspace in between. And for a bisque firing, they can touch each other. Glaze should have at least a ½ inch around, because some colors will burn onto other colors. Leave a burn mark. So I got the kiln full with that load, and I'm going to close the lid carefully. I'm going to put it the whole way down. This is a bisque fire. Sometimes if you're doing a glaze fire, you might want it cracked, but I always fire it with the lid clear closed. I'm going to put the peephole plugs in. Alright, I put them in and then I loosen them just a smidge so that air can get around them. I have had like pressure kind of build up, and if they're in there too tightly, and pop them out on the floor, which you don't want, because then it will leave a burn mark on the floor. So put them in the whole way and then just loosen them just a smidge so the pressure can escape. Okay. That's what happens when they fall on the floor. They're a little broken, but they're still usable. I'm going to leave the top hole out. I'm going to vent the kiln with the top peephole out. Particularly important with glaze, you get a nicer, richer, shinier glaze fire if it is vented more. So the air from the kiln right now, it will get sucked in here and go down through. It'll be vented through what's called the vent-a-kiln system, okay? And then outside. No fumes, nothing like that. As you can see by the moisture, though, the rust, there is a lot of water that brings out of the kiln. So let's start it. This is a bisque load. The vent-a-kiln system plugs in separately to the wall outlet. Hear the sound. That's the vent-a-kiln system. Okay, and it's flashing, as I mentioned, that's the temperature inside the kiln right now. It's being read inside the kiln. So let's look at this panel. We want to do an automatic firing, because this kiln works excellent automatic firings. There's several choices in cone fire mode. Cone fire mode, and it has 3 program modes. Slow, you notice it builds the temperature up very gradually to what would need to be probably for an 05 or 1,910 degrees, 1,850 degrees, depending upon what cone you're going to. Builds the temperature up very slowly. Medium reaches that temperature a little faster. Fast, it builds up that temperature and it reaches that full temperature very quickly. Fast works for glazes that like to particularly have a reach temperature quickly. That would be like yellows and oranges and well, yeah, at least yellows and some greens. They like to have that temperature fast. Fast is not at all ever recommended for any bisque load. I'm telling you what, you'll just have broken clay pots, because right in this range in here at 300, 500 degrees or something, right in that range in there is when a lot of moisture leaves and leaves a steam very soon, and it'll break your clay pots right in that range, right in there. So you don't want it to go to fast. You want it to go very, very slowly. It can be programmed more, but I have always just used these. They work very well. This is a bisque fire, so I'm going to fire it slowly. Let's see. There is some hold temperature. If you want it after it reaches that temperature to hold more, that's hold. Let's just go through this. Cone fire. It lights up cone. It's flashing 05. That was the last one I used. If I don't want 05, I go 06. That would be a nice glaze temperature. 04. Whoops. Let's clear that. Alright, so I pushed a button for a bisque fire. I'm going to fire this 05. I did cone fire, and I looked up there, and it's flashing cone fire 05. I've used these buttons for 06, 04, whatever. This is a bisque though, so I want that 05. This is an 05, 06 clay body. Now I want to enter that. Now it's flashing speed. The last speed was fast, because I fired some glaze, but boy, I don't want that, do I? So I'm going to push my finger down here and go slow. Now, enter that. Hold. It's asking me for, oops, I'm sorry, it's asking me for hold. I don't want that temperature to hold. Once it reaches this temperature, it can turn off. That's fine, okay? You might want hold if you have certain glazes that you want to be held at that high temperature at a certain length of time, so they have time to flow. I don't want that. Once it reaches a temperature, it's good. So hold is 0, and that's in hours and minutes. I enter that for 0. Right now it says stop. Hasn't started, and it's still flashing the internal temperature. What did I do? I went through it. Let's go through the buttons again. Cone fire 05. Glaze would be 06. This is a bisque 05. Glaze is 06. I entered that. Speed, slow. I like that. That's great for hand building. Don't rush them. Have them take their time. Glaze could be medium or fast. Speed is slow. Enter that. Hold time 0. I don't need any 0. There we go. Enter. It's ready. All I got to do is push start, and we're ready to go. Kiln is on, and you will start to hear there. Do you hear that click? That clicking noise is the automatic kiln setter turning the elements on inside the kiln. Okay, there's 3 main elements. They each have their own thermocouple, and they get turned on independently. Maybe the bottom one, maybe the top one, the middle one, depending upon how the temperature of the kiln is inside. This adjusts it. It can turn all 3 on, or it can turn on one at a time. To maybe the top is getting too hot. So it turns on them, it turns it off a little bit. The bottom is cold, it turns that on a little longer at the bottom. It's very great. And then this is all we got to do. I'll come back in later, an hour or 2, and we'll look for that internal temperature to be rising. So I like to record each kiln firing. This is the chart here, and it's right outside the door of the kiln. It's a kiln record. The last time it was fired was November 28th. Okay, I just called this firing 1 for the year 2017. It was a bisque. It was an 0 fire temperature, cone fire instead of ramp and hold. Fast because it was an empty kiln. There was nothing in it. This was a test fire. No hold time, and I turned it on at 7:22 in the morning. Notice what was in that load. It was a test fire. Just making sure it would reach temperature. It did. It turned itself off. The next time I checked it, it was off. and it had started to cool down at 1141 degrees in the afternoon, at 12:20 in the afternoon. So I put it at lunchtime. It had turned off at 4 hours and 4 minutes. That time, you read it right from the kiln. In place of the temperature inside, which you notice is already 88 degrees, it's already raising. When the kiln is off, it will flash, and it will say how many hours and how many minutes the firing, the length was of the firing. And on that particular day, it was 4 hours and 4 minutes. This is the test fire. So today is December 8th. I'm going to call this 2017-2. It was a bisque. It was a 05. Glaze would be the 06 for this 05, 06 clay body. It was a cone fire. I'm doing it slow. There was no hold time, and it was on at 1:32. 1:32. Okay? Over here, I want to go draw what was in there so I can remember what artwork was in here. So I usually make a little picture here. On this shelf was high school, and on this shelf above was high school also. If it was Mrs. Kaiser's room, Mrs. Sigel's room, I would make a note, 1-2, 2-1, who is on each shelf, because that's, you need to really to keep track of that. All right? So later on I'll check it. I'll check it before I go. I'll make any observations, and then in the morning, hopefully, we'll write down the total firing time. Here's the chart.